Well, interestingly, we've been talking about the losers list also, and what you just heard is from South Africa, from Betty, has to do with corruption and how the former president, Jacob Zuma, is right now facing trial with regards to that. What do you think about that, Jide, when you look at how South Africa is taking steps to discourage corruption as against what we have in Nigeria?
I think the first is, there are 5 words to summarize this, and that is not too big to fall. And that's what South Africa has done. And by doing this, what they've shown, but before we even go on, is to first understand that Jacob Zuma is innocent until proven otherwise. But there are 3 reasons why they've done this, and that's to be able to change the perception of corruption, change the perception of inequality in South Africa, and change the perception of injustice. Because those are the 3 things South Africans are complaining about today: corruption, inequality, and lack of justice. And by doing this, even though again Jacob Zuma is innocent until proven otherwise, they intend to rebuild their foundation, and that is by giving the people confidence that the government is for them. So it's all about democracy. It's all about the government for the people, of the people, by the people. So the days ahead, we'll really find out what the South African courts will determine. Is Jacob Zuma innocent? There's a probability that he's innocent. And is Jacob Zuma, or is Jacob Zuma not innocent? And again, there's a reasonable probability. So we cannot yet hang him. That wouldn't be the fair thing to do. Let the courts decide that. And after the courts decide, we'll then be able to look at the real merits of those decisions.
Okay, coming back here to Nigeria, we've been looking at that list of corrupt individuals, or looters, if you will, that has been published repeatedly, and the controversies that have trailed all of that release. What have you been able to find?
So there are 3 things I would like us to discuss this morning, Gima. The first is stealing is good. Now you might be shocked, and I'll explain. Oh, stealing is good, and I'll explain. The second is to understand that there's no such thing as a looters list from the APC or a looters list from the PDP. Now the third is, what does all of this mean for you and I? So let's start with the first. Stealing is good. You see, Gimba, as a young man, one of the stories that I loved the most was the story of Robin Hood.
Stealing from the rich and giving to the poor.
Oh, yes. Now, why Robin...
Is that the case here?
Oh, that is the case. So Robin Hood was a thief. But again, the whole message of Robin Hood was to let people understand, especially as young men, that it isn't about how much you accumulate. It is about empathy. And so we all wanted to see Robin Hood, who will take all the money that the rich had stolen, not give it to himself, but give it to the poor. And so I realized that stealing, from that perspective, is good. But today, that is not what is happening in Nigeria. We are not having Robin Hoods in Nigeria. What we have today is people stealing from the poor to give the rich.
The reverse is the case here.
The reverse is the case. And that case is so bad that stealing from the poor to give the rich is such unbelievable that even the Englishman has still not been able to find a word to define it. When you steal from the poor to feed the rich. That is the challenge we have today. In this case, who is the poor? Now, the poor is Nigeria. Why do I say Nigeria is poor? The CBN tells us that last year, the federal government earned only 2.7 trillion naira from everyone, an equivalent of only 40 naira per person per day. That's just 10 cents per day. That is how much the federal government of Nigeria earns from all Nigerians. So, Gimba, if I collect 40 naira from you every day, will you feel it? Perhaps not. Compare that to the US. The equivalent, the government in the US gets an equivalent of 10,000 naira per person per day. In Nigeria, the government only gets 10 cents. But before we continue with understanding this looters list, is to first of all really ask ourselves, how many political parties are in Nigeria? Now, INEC says over 60, and they're still registering. And so today we have the ruling party saying, oh, we've released the looters list. And the opposition are also saying, no, this is the complete list. But here is the fact, Gimba. Today in Nigeria, we've got only one party. Now, what do I mean by we've got only one party, Gimba? Let's look at, if we look at the executives, we've got several of them that were in the PDP and moved over to the APC. But to be more specific, let's look at what is going on in the National Assembly, the upper chambers, the Senate, 109 members. Let's look at the North and the South. In the Northwest, we've got 21 senators. 19 out of those 21 senators, Gimba, are in the APC. But the fact is, out of the 19 APC senators in the Northwest, 11 were in the PDP. Indeed, we've got 44 APC senators across all these three zones in the North. Out of these 44 senators, more than half were in the PDP. That is the fact. More than half of APC senators in the North were at one time in the PDP. The APC has 5 senators in the South-South. 4 out of these 5 senators were in the PDP. The only APC senator in the Southeast was formerly in the PDP. And so in the final analysis, more than half of the senators in today's APC were in the PDP. So we really don't have an opposition party. What we have, based on the statement of facts that we've presented today, is that there's only one party, and people move between these parties. So we shouldn't say there's a list from the APC or a list from the PDP. What we have isn't an APC looters list or a PDP's looters list. What we have is a list from the looting party of Nigeria. That is the only party we have in Nigeria. The looting party.
Okay.
And this looting party isn't just the party of today. It's always been the looting party. Transparency International says it's always been the looting party.
We'll have to take a quick break and we'll be back after these messages. Join us again. Welcome back. So, Jide, you've developed a couple of slides here talking about the corruption perception affecting foreign direct investment. Let us in on that.
Yeah, so the first is we've established that there isn't any significant difference between the APC and the PDP. What we have really is the LPN, the looting party of Nigeria. Now, what is the impact on this, on you and I? When we talk about corruption, it's not just Nigerians that listen to these cries of corruption. Foreign investors also hear this news of corruption, and the evidence does show that interest in Nigeria is waning. So, for instance, in 2014, $2.2 billion of foreign direct investment came into the country. But in the last 4 years, Gimba, something phenomenal has happened. Every year, foreign direct investment into Nigeria has been on the decline.
Is it as a result of corruption? Or
corruption is
as a result of policies that are...
Corruption is one of the main things. Because when we talk about corruption, what foreign investors hear is not just corruption, it is risk. Nigeria is risky. And so, as our last year, compared to $2.2 billion of FDI 4 years ago, last year we had less than $1 billion of FDI.
So how do you connect that to the looters list?
Oh, yes, because the looters list is all about risk. So the longer the list for foreign investors, it shows the higher the risk of doing business in Nigeria. The looters list, for instance, talks about people that had allegedly stole from the military. So it means doing business with the military is risky. The looters list has people that were former governors. It also means doing business with the state government in Nigeria is high risk. The looters list has list of former ministers that enacted policies. It also means doing business with policy makers in Nigeria is high risk. So whenever we talk about corruption and we can't manage that narrative properly, it reduces the goodwill we have in other countries. And that is even evident from how much the UK and the US are interested in Nigeria. As at 4 years ago, capital inflow from the UK and the US into Nigeria, into this nation, was over $14 billion, Gimba. Right now, capital inflow from the UK and the US, our two biggest sources of inflow, is below $7 billion. And so, there is so much evil in this nation. Now, why do I say there's so much evil in the country? Even the Bible talks about it. 1 Timothy 6:10, it says the love of money is the root of evil. 1 Timothy 6:10, even in the Quran, pick up the Quran, Quran chapter 2, verse 188. In the Quran chapter 4, verse 29, it talks about being careful about loving money. And so when we talk about corruption in Nigeria, what we are really saying is there's evil in our land. And so we should ask ourselves, if Robin Hood, really Gimba, steals from the rich to give the poor, what name should we give those that steal from the poor
and give
to the rich?
That's a good place to let it rest. I want to thank you so much indeed. Babajide Ogunsanwo is our data and information analyst, and that's where we wrap it up for Sunrise Daily today from our Lagos studios. Thank you so much for watching. I am Gimba Umar.
Well, yes, indeed. That's the show as well today. We'll see you next week. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Thank you for watching. I'm Neota Igbe.
Have a great weekend, everybody. I'm Ajuri Ngilale.